Tony Moayed is a construction pro. He's been in the business for 40 plus years, worked for the folks like Turner, Granite, McCarthy, and other folks before starting his own business, going through the ups and downs of owning a construction company. And just recently, he has sold his construction company internally to employees. And that's what this episode is all about, the process of the sale, how he chose the structure, who he chose to sell to, what they needed to do to go through the process in order for Tony to completely retire and get paid out, the priorities that Tony focused on when making the sale, why he chose an internal as opposed to an external sale. There's so much detail in this podcast that you really want to take your time to listen carefully and understand the psychology behind selling your construction company and the deep challenge associated with doing that successfully. Feel free to check out the other episode that we have with Tony, which I'll link to in the show notes. And it's a description of the challenges Tony went through while he owned a construction company and how he refused at one point to declare bankruptcy, choosing rather to suck it up and to fulfill his obligations. And that's a tremendously insightful episode as well. So the links are in the show notes. Make sure that you check out that episode and enjoy my conversation today with Tony Moayed. This is Eric Anderton, and you're listening to Construction Genius, a leadership masterclass. Thomas Edison said that genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. If you're a construction leader, you know all about the perspiration, and this show is all about the 1% inspiration that you can add to your hard work to help you to improve your leadership. Tony, welcome back to Construction Genius.
Morning, Eric. How are you?
I'm doing well. Great to have you on the show. Last time we chatted, you took us through the saga that you went through in your business where you refused to go into bankruptcy at a particular point in your company's history. Can you take the audience back through that just in a brief manner before we dive into the substance of what we want to talk about here today?
Yes, sure. We went through an expansion, and that was really through acquisition of Hearn Construction, which took us to Southern California and across the entire.
And you started off in Northern California, right?
Yes, we started in Sacramento, and then we ended up opening up an office in Irvine and Bakersfield.
Yeah. And your background, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but your background, you were with Turner for quite a while. Can you give the audience just a little bit about your background before you started your own company?
Yeah, I had about 23 years of construction experience before starting my company. And my last position was business development manager at Turner. Prior to that, I was at McCarthy. I was their chief estimator at McCarthy Building Companies. And in 2003, I started my consulting company. In 2004, immediately after, started a construction company called TriCorp Construction. And by 2010, we were doing very well. So we ended up expanding into Southern California, like I said, and also opened up offices in Bakersfield and Irvine. And by 2013, due to that expansion going from 30 million a year to close to about 100 million a year, we got into some financial woes and ended up with $6 million loss in that year. And both my attorney and my partners wanted to file bankruptcy. And I ended up not filing bankruptcy, buying out my partners and staying with TriCorp, finished TriCorp's work and started TriCorp TriCorp Group, which is a little confusing, but it was a new corporation that allowed me to do two things. One is to finish the obligations of the old company, which was TriCorp Construction. Secondly, was to be able to generate enough revenue to help both old construction company, TriCorp Construction, and get me to a point where I could retire.
Okay. There's a link in the show notes, everyone, where you can go and listen to our first interview where Tony details out what he just described, that decision not to go into bankruptcy and how he built back the company. But today, what we want to talk about is that path to retirement that you've traced.
Right.
And so you're currently now, just tell us what the situation that you're in currently.
Well, I've retired out of TriCorp Group, and I stayed with the company as a board of director, position on the board of directors for about a year. But the buyout is complete, and it really started about 2020, and by end of 2023, I was completely paid out and retired.
Okay, so this is pretty cool, right? So for the audience, again, listen to that first episode where Tony talks about the process he went through, basically saving the company. Now he's sold the company. And so that's what we're going to talk about today, is that process of selling. So Tony, when did you start planning for the sale, and how long did the process take from start to finish?
Sure. So again, the whole entire issue started in 2013, but by about 2018, 19, I knew that I was going to be successful in finishing TriCorp's obligations, and TriCorp Group, the new construction company, was doing well. So that's when I started really looking at retirement. And I knew that this would be about a 7-year process to get through. And so I started looking into that very seriously in the beginning of 2019.
Okay. And when you began to look at that, obviously you work with a variety of outside advisors, CPA, bonding company, all those kinds of folks. As you were beginning to socialize and talk about these plans that you had, what was their response to your plans?
The response was very positive. Everybody was trying to help, but I had a third party initially evaluate the company. And I knew that, the way to go was to really sell the company externally for the maximum amount of dollars. However, I really struggled with the fact that I had some really good people inside the company, and that, once I sold the company, the culture of the company would change, and also the longevity of those folks may not be secure with a new purchase. So, I decided to go with an internal transition, sell the company to the folks inside TriCorp Group, as opposed to selling it externally.
And so why did you choose to exit the business at this particular time in your life?
Well, I always wanted to retire early, maybe a little bit naive when I was young. I wanted to retire by age 55, which, later on in my life didn't make sense. Then it was 60 years old. But by 2019, I was already 59 years old. And it was really time for me to focus on family and myself. And construction industry, as much as still love the industry, and you take great pride in seeing your product and coming out of the ground and turning into a beautiful building and so on and so forth. But it's hard. It's a hard life. The grind of the construction was the main reason I decided to get out. And like I said, I wanted to get out as quickly as possible. It ended up being at age 64 instead of 60, which was perfectly fine with me.
Yeah, it's interesting. So as you were you evaluated that external sale, and for reasons of culture and the longevity of the employees, you decided to go internal. What were the types of internal sale structures that you took a look at?
We looked at actually few types of structure. One was really to sell to the outside, which would include having myself stay on board for a period of time. Talking to others, it was a grueling and not a great experience to have somebody come in there. First of all, they try to change your culture. Then they put incentives in there for the company to be profitable, and my payout would be tied to those incentives. And so I'd have to stay on working for the new entity. And none of that really seemed appealing to me. Then we looked at ESOP plan, and ESOP plans for a company our size was pretty expensive. And an ESOP, by the way, is a plan where all the employees participate in the ownership, which was really attractive to me initially. Until I started looking into it, it's too regimented, too rule intensive, and too expensive. And so after looking at all of that, again, I decided to stay with an internal, transition.
Okay, so the ESOP wasn't going to work. The external sale wasn't going to work. It's interesting that you've mentioned a couple of times already the culture. Why was the culture of the company important to you and maintaining that? Why was that important?
I had seen some other companies go through this process, and architectural firms, construction firms, and talking to friends who had gone through that process, not one had a positive experience. Because again, what happens is that company comes in, one of the first things they do is really they want to change your processes. Number two is that they really want to change your culture to what they're used to. And I went through some of that with, when we purchased TriCorp Construction purchased Hearn Construction,
Yep.
and it was the opposite. They had to come into our culture, and we had to get along with the folks with a whole different culture. So I had gone through that experience, and it was very grueling. It was very difficult, and we
Yes.
had a lot of clashes. So all that became apparent to me that culture was one of the most important things that I really had to consider.
Excellent. So, have you always had that thought that you wanted the company to continue on after you were gone, after you retired?
No, I was open to, outside sales when I really first started looking at this. And it took about a couple of years of grueling, a couple of years of intense looking at options. And so, no, it was not apparent to me at the beginning.
So, as you're going through those options, obviously, like you said, the ESOP can be somewhat complex. An external sale has its advantages and disadvantages. How did you finally reach a conclusion? What was that, just a gut feel? Was it based on your analysis? What process did you use so that you were at the point where you're saying, I am comfortable with the decision I'm making and I'm going to invest time and energy in going in this particular direction?
It was really a priority for me more than anything. I looked at the options, and the priority was keep the employees that I had and the culture intact and make sure that there's a legacy that's followed in the company. And so then I looked internally and I looked at my opportunities with the current employees, and my options were good. So it was kind of obvious. I knew that I wouldn't make the amount of money, but at that point, I had to really prioritize what I really wanted to do, and that was to really to sell internally, to make sure that the employees were stayed on and they were happy with what they were doing. There was a longevity, and the culture continued and all those things. And so it was really a priority more than anything at the very end.
Okay, so who did you decide to sell your company to, and why did you make that decision?
Yeah. So I started looking at three conditions for choosing the people. And number one was loyalty. Number two was longevity of the folks with the company. And number three was people who were in the correct position. So, correct position for me were to cover the three legs of the stool, as we call stool for a construction company, which are accounting, estimating, and the field operations. So I
Yep.
decided to go with Chris as the president, who was really the head of the operations, and he remained as the operations manager through this process. And he had been with the company for 17 years of its 20 years of history. And Matt, as the vice president, CFO, he had been with the company for about 5 years. But I honestly, I can't tell you any person that I know of who is more honest than Matt. And that's a very important characteristic for your accounting department, head of your accounting department. And then last one was Ryan, who he was going to be the vice president estimating and pre-construction services. He had been with the company about 11, 12 years.
Okay, so it's interesting. And again, I like your clarity there. So in any construction company, you got to get the work, you got to build it, and then you got to get paid. And so you decided to go with the three people, that three-legged stool, and three people who could, take care of each one of those legs. This idea of loyalty, what do you mean by loyalty?
I wanted somebody that was not just looking at the bottom line, the dollars, that there was somebody that really was loyal to the good of the company. So not only committed to show up, but to go over and beyond and be loyal to me. And so the only way I could really test that is really just to give them assignments and see how they come through it. And sometimes purpose, not give them enough instructions to see what they do. See if they just follow in line. Do they question me? Do they work with me? Do they just follow like a sheep, or how do they respond? And through that process, I figured out who were the loyal guys that would actually do two things. One is to make sure that the profitability of the company and the integrity of the processes and people were in place. And then secondly, their loyalty was to me. So it's multifaceted.
It's interesting because as you're describing that, I get this picture that you're also not only looking for loyalty to you, but also a sense of independence and capability to be able to run their own stuff without you having to micromanage them. Did I hear that correctly?
Exactly. Yes. That was important for me. And especially it's important for a transition. So as you can imagine, as I was stepping out, especially the last year, I wanted to make sure that these three people were capable of handling the company once I was gone. So that independence was important. And I wanted the loyalty during the process because I knew that this would be a grueling process and they're not going to give up or just look at the bottom line, that they were going to make the right decision for me and the company.
So then many times construction company owners, they begin to identify people for, even if it's a promotion perhaps, or not even an internal sale, and you want it for them, but they don't necessarily want it for themselves. How did you know that Chris and Matt and Ryan were actually interested in being an owner of the company?
I really watched them do what they did, and I knew that they were capable. So there's competency there. And then the next step was really to approach them and to see if they were truly interested. And I can tell you, 99% of whoever you approach, when you tell them that you're going to pass on the company to them, they're going to say yes. So it takes a while. So it took us about a year to put the agreement together, so it was a process. And during that process, we were testing each other. And by end of that process, especially during negotiations, I knew that I had the right team. It came apparent. And these guys wanted it, and they wanted it bad. And that's important. They have to want it. And they did.
Did you tell them all at the same time, or did you kind of roll it out through the individuals? How did you go about that part of the process?
Approached them individually, and then I brought the three together. So it was a short period of time. It wasn't like it was months of introduction. It was just days.
And how confident were you that they were able to work together? Because obviously, if they're going to be owners, they're not just working daily, but there's a deeper connection, a deeper responsibility there.
Yeah, we had that discussion. One of the things that I mentioned to them was that it's number one is that you guys have to be able to work together. And I actually had partners prior, and they had been watching what happened with the prior partners, especially Chris. He had been with me almost the entire duration of the company. So he had the history, and I had issues with my partners, and we knew there were lessons learned. And so we talked about those lessons learned, and three guys really actually did a great job of coming together, and they got very close, and they got along great, and they get along just fantastic even to this date.
What were those lessons learned in your prior partnership that you were anxious or really focused on in communicating to this new group of partners?
The number one lessons learned was that you can't trust a partner in good times only. When adversity hits, challenges are presented, that's when the true character of your partners come out. And for me, it was near bankruptcy where I really figured out who my partners were, unfortunately. So there were some lessons learned that I wouldn't really recommend to anybody to go through to learn, but I can pass on.
Change is difficult for adults, particularly people who've been doing something for a long time. So you've probably been leading people in your organization for a long time, but you have a sneaky suspicion that your leadership could improve. I have a method for you that can help your leadership improve tremendously. And it's very simple. It's taking my course, The Shift. I call it The Shift because when people move into leadership, they have to shift from building projects to leading teams of people. And to make that shift, they have to learn to do things that they perhaps haven't done before. How to communicate effectively with a team, how to run effective meetings, how to manage time effectively, how to build a high-performing team. All of these things are covered in the shift. And it's a tremendously directed, focused course that will transform your leadership. It's self-paced. All you have to do is go to theshift.constructiongenius.com to learn more about it. And it's really the easiest way for you to go from micromanaging to leading with confidence. So go to the page, read more about the people who've taken the course in terms of the testimonials, folks who have benefited from it, everything that's covered in the course, and just take your time reading it. There's a bunch of bonuses involved as well. And then you can sign up for the course. And the best news is it is 100% guaranteed. And what I mean by that is this. If you take the course and you come to the end and say, you know what, Eric, this was not worth my time and money, just send me an email, eric@constructiongenius.com, and I will refund 100% of your money with a smile on my face, because I am here for one reason only, and that is for you to benefit from the content and the training that The Shift provides. So go check it out, theshift.constructiongenius.com. And now back to the interview. What kind of adversity did those three experience together that gave you confidence that they would be actually able to go through adversity as owners?
They didn't go through the type of adversity, obviously, that I went through, but it was really challenges, everyday challenges, especially, as you can imagine, the grind between the departments, especially estimating and operations. And so those two individuals, Chris and Ryan, learned to get along with each other very quickly. And I didn't really have to do much with them. These guys had the right character to begin with, and that's why I chose them. So, they didn't have to go through too much, honestly. They're lucky.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Where did you find guidance or resources to navigate the sale?
Yeah, that's interesting. I have an interesting story, which I'm not going to take too long to share with you. But the short answer is, I would highly advise anyone going down this path to seek professional help. And what I did was I went to our CPA at the time, and then the CPA had gone through this type of transition prior, but the structure that they used was, to create an LLC or convert your company into an LLC and put the purchasing partners, we'll call them, as members of that LLC. And so the members of LLC either start with 0% of membership, or you can give them some percentage of, small percentage of ownership as an incentive. And then as the company grows and makes money, you would get paid out. I would get paid out, and the percentages of the members would go up till my percentage would get to 0 and their percentage would get to 100%. And these are usually 5 to 7 year plans. The biggest issue that I had with that plan were a few things, but the biggest one was double taxation of this model. So I had to pay taxes, so did the three guys in this case. And so we had to pay around 70, 75, 80% in taxes collectively, depending on length of the program and obviously the dollars. And so I was very concerned with that. And the CPA company also referred me to an attorney that they had used putting these transactions together in the past. So we met with them. I started with a series of questions regarding the structure, and honestly, the people that we were meeting with, they couldn't answer the questions. So they called in a senior partner who answered some of the questions, not really to my satisfaction. So I was not impressed. And then on top of it, salt on the wound, they sent me a $3,000 bill for that meeting. So I immediately knew that I was looking at the wrong team.
Okay, so this is important, right? On the one hand, you have a date set in your mind where you'd like to be out of the business, but on the other hand, you're patiently going through the process because you don't want to rush something like this and make mistakes that would have a long-term negative impact. So then at this point in the process, what did you do then?
Yeah, so we changed our CPA firm. We got really lucky, Eric. We ended up switching to a new company who structured the deal in such way where I saved 20% of federal taxes.
Uh-huh.
I paid no federal taxes, 0 in this deal. Okay. And so that was, first of all, that was huge. And it did not require me to go into an LLC and all these funny things, because one of the functions of LLC is that, all your current work has to be changed out. So because your structure is changing. At the time we were a C corporation, the structure is changing from C to LLC. So if you've got any kind of, especially public contracts, it's very difficult to change your contract from your structure from a C corporation to LLC. And so there were many things that this structure afforded us that made things much easier. So that, we followed a rule, IRS rule, section 1202, which gave us 100% federal tax exemption. And so we started with a C corporation. We changed that to an S corporation. The whole structure and what we followed is very complex. So I'm not going to get into too much of details. I am in
Sure.
the process of writing a book, so I'm going to really detail that out for folks that want to pursue that. And you have to meet certain criteria to be able to take advantage of that tax exemption.
We'll have to get you back on the show when you've written the book and have a discussion about that. I'm serious because I think it's so important for construction company owners to be able to explore multiple options when it comes to selling the business. Now, what I'm curious about is, obviously, you valued your company at a certain dollar amount. And then I'm going to make an assumption, and just to correct my assumption, I'm going to assume that the folks who are purchasing it from you don't have the cash in the bank just to write you a check.
That's right. That's exactly right. So what happens is, really, you write the structure that we ended up with was a stock purchase agreement between us. And so it was also, I had to have some kind of backing. So it was backed by personal and business promissory notes. As the corporation paid me out, the partners, the three guys, were able to increase their percentage of ownership until it hit 100%. Very similar to what I described previously, except that we kept the same structure of the corporation. It was just all done through an agreement. So it became very important that all of us really paid attention to the details of that agreement. And we actually started in 2020, and by end of 2023, I retired. So it was really a 4-year plan with a 2-year extension, just in case that the corporation was not able to pay me out. But we got lucky. We made it. I say we got lucky. There was a lot of hard work involved. And by the way, that went through a pandemic.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. So as you're going through that, then, you have the promissory notes, you have the expectations. What were some of the major challenges? Obviously, the pandemic is one, but what were some of the other major challenges as you were going through the process? And was there ever a point where you're thinking, oh man, this might not work?
Oh, yeah, right at the beginning. As a matter of fact, our CPA and attorney and our bonding company, all three said this plan is super ambitious. You're trying to get millions of dollars out of this deal in 4-year period. Well, and our bonding company especially, so that was a challenge, right? You're pulling money out of the corporation, yet you're trying to maintain a level of bonding capacity, and not only maintain it, but increase it. So back in 2020, when we started, we were doing about $30 million worth of work. And by 2023, we finished $70 million worth of work. So we not only had to maintain a level, but also grow the bonding capacity and pull money out while you're doing that. So it's a huge challenge. And you really got to figure out, you got to put a right team together. You got to put a plan together. You got to start early on the planning of this. And I really didn't start early enough, but we still did well. Pandemic really didn't hurt us because we were doing two things. One is that we were doing projects that involved affordable housing, which was essential services.
Yep.
And because of that, and we were doing a lot of self-perform work. So our work not only didn't stop, but our self-perform work allowed us to get PPP loans, which really helped us maintain our staffing. Not only maintain, but we increased our staffing because our volume increased. And so we had to increase our staffing. So PPP did what it was supposed to do, which was really fuel the growth of the company. And so it worked out, it was a win-win-win for everyone.
Yep. How much cash out of pocket, you don't have to give me the specific numbers, but how much cash out of pocket did the new partners have to put into the deal? Or did that just come out through the revenue that you were generating? How did that all work?
They didn't have to put anything into the deal. Isn't that sweet?
Well, for them, it's super sweet. So that's interesting. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Is that possible?
Sure. I mean, it's usually how it's done internally. You can
Right.
ask for the partners to put in cash, but at that point, I didn't really need their cash and they were not capable of putting in hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Right.
Tens of thousands of dollars wouldn't help much, really,
Yeah,
the
right.
size of the company. I needed a seven-figure payout, large seven-figure payout, and they were not capable of doing it. So the company has to accomplish that, right?
Yes.
And so the company also has to pay all the taxes.
Yep.
So we ended up doing that, knowing that I got a 20% discount on the bottom line. So that helped really make the financial deal work. And the guys didn't have to put any money into the deal except that they didn't deliver on the agreement. They had promissory notes, personal promissory notes. So
Interesting.
if they didn't deliver, that meant everything they owned. I could come after everything they owned, and I could get my stocks back on the business promissory note side. I could take them to the cleaners, and I could restart from scratch if it didn't work. So they had high stakes. So, and I tell you, I don't think those guys ever flinched. I mean, they were very happy with the deal, and they just worked their butts off for
So
this.
that's so interesting because that requires a tremendous amount of trust between you and them.
That's what I meant by the trust and loyalty, and you can't just take somebody off the street and do this with.
So it's
Absolutely.
interesting because you mentioned, and it gives me a little more clarity because earlier on in the interview, you talked a lot about personal loyalty to you. And now I think I understand that a little bit better because, if I have that personal relationship with you, I'm going to feel a lot more obligated to meet my commitments than if it was just a transactional relationship where I was looking just to make a deal.
Right. And they have to trust me also. It's not a one-way trust, right?
Yes.
Because I could honestly get through 2 years of this plan and say, hey, by the way, I'm going to start a litigation and I'm going to come after you because you didn't do this and that. And I could
Wow.
really get picky with things and get out of the deal. I can. I know how.
Yeah. No, it's interesting.
Legal grind, and I know how to get out of deals. But so they had to trust me also. And I gave them my word. And they knew that. They knew that. It was not a comfortable position for them. But that's not what I wanted. And I made it
No.
very clear to them that I wanted to retire and I wanted to maintain the relationship with the guys, with the company, and I wanted the legacy of the company to continue. And in order for all of that to work properly, we really had to all get along
Yeah.
ultimately. Yeah.
So it's interesting because you could have made more money by selling it externally.
Millions more.
And that's not chump change, right?
No.
Why was it that you said, you know what? I don't need those millions more. What was it about that?
Again, it's what you have to go through. And why for me, priority was not to have to go through a sale. I knew what it would take. A sale
Yeah.
would take somebody coming in there and taking over your company,
Yep.
basically. And you become an employee.
Yes.
You do what they say you're going to do, and it changes everything. And bottom line is, I didn't want that. And I wanted to I had some really great employees inside the company. So I looked at that and we were doing self-performed work. I didn't know what would happen with that. I wanted to continue that. It was a good profit center. I loved our guys. Some of the guys have been with us 15, 16, 17 years to this date. And
Yep.
they're great people. So people and preserving the relationship and longevity of those folks working for TriCorp and the TriCorp name remaining the same. Those were all my priorities.
That's awesome.
Not
So,
money. Not money. Money was not the priority.
hey, quick break to tell you about my book. If you don't already know, it's Construction Genius. You're saying, Eric, why should I read this book? I'll tell you why. Because it's packed with effective, hands-on, practical, simple, no BS, leadership, strategy, sales, and marketing advice, all for construction companies. I'm going to make a commitment to you here. If you buy the book and read it, you're going to get at least one piece of advice that if you use and apply it will completely transform your leadership. And that can come from a variety of different places from the content in the book. So I want you to go to Amazon and I want you to buy a copy for yourself because you will tremendously benefit from reading the book. And then what I'd like you to do is to buy copies for every single one of your leaders. And if you buy 10 or more copies, send me an email, eric@constructiongenius.com, and I will come into your office via Zoom, and we will do a 1-hour Q&A on the book and a bonus leadership training session for the team of people who read the book. I would normally charge $3,500 for an hour of my time. All you have to do is buy 10 or more of the books. If you just bought 10, that would be less than $200. That is what you call a killer deal. There's so much value in the book. You have to get it. You have to read it. I know you'll love it. So do that today. All right, back to the conversation with Tony. So it's really interesting, right? You've got to be able to identify clearly your priorities and then allow those to drive the way you structure a deal when you're looking to get out of a company or when you're looking to retire. Yeah,
exactly.
That's interesting.
You have to, as part of the plan, you have to think about your life after and really figure out what it is that you want to do. And for me, I had a consulting company that I had about a year prior to even the construction company, TriCorp Construction. And I knew that I had a life after with that company.
Yep.
And so that was one of the things that I had set up. And the second thing I did was really, I tried to figure out, even early on, how to sell the company. We actually, in 2013, looked at selling the company with my old partners. And we had an offer. And I'm glad we didn't take it because it was a low offer. And we figured out that we were in trouble. So I approached the corporation that was going to buy us out, and I told them about our troubles, and they ran. I mean, they ran. They were like, we not only not want to do this transaction with you guys, not sure if we ever want to go through this with you again. And I don't blame them because what we went through was not pretty. And so for me, it was really a matter of, and that's what I would suggest to anybody, was really figuring out your options and figuring out your priorities, what it is you want out of the company, but what do you want to do afterwards? And start planning, I would say 10 years ahead of time.
So let's hit on that a little bit. What are you doing now in your retirement that is keeping you engaged? What is it that you're really spending your time doing?
I'm doing the things that I really never had enough time to do. And so I start, my day with going to gym, for example, something I couldn't do easily. And, I even get in the sauna and, I take my time, right?
Nice.
And 3 hours in the gym.
That's beautiful. I love that. I love that.
I have my consulting company, so on average, I spend about 4 hours, and it doesn't come in 4 hours spurts per week, but I spend about average of 4 hours. Sometimes it comes in, I've got to work week straight and then nothing for 2 or 3 weeks. But it really transitions into some work that I have to do, which keeps me in touch with the industry, which is, for me, it's very important.
Yeah.
But the most important thing, honestly, is that I'm spending most of my time with my wife, with my grandson. I have a 9-month-old grandson, first grandkid.
Nice.
And he's great and love that. And my mom, unfortunately, is bedridden, but she doesn't have a lot of time left. So I'm really fortunate to be able to spend some time with her. And so a lot of time is spent with family and then friends. And it's very important prior to planning to make sure that you have some friends left.
Yeah, right.
And so you can carry that friendship into your retirement. And, we've been planning on doing some long-term traveling, which we haven't had time yet to do because of all the things that have happened with my mom and the grandkids. So we're planning to see some sites within the United States and then overseas, which, we will do. We just haven't done much of that. And I've got a place in that I bought in Palm Springs and one in Lake Tahoe. We spent some time down there and some in Lake Tahoe, and not much time because we can't be away too much time from the family. So I'm busy.
That's great. When did it sink in that you were truly done with business?
Day one. Yeah, when I woke up week one, day one, and I didn't have to go to work, it was very strange. It was a strange feeling, and I didn't know what to do with my time, honestly. And the first thing I did was I went and got some work out of my consulting company. So I pursued some work on the side and got busy with that and started really focusing on my health. So I read a book which was very helpful in trying to figure out where my health was at the time, which was not great,
What was
honestly.
the book?
Outlive by
Uh-huh.
Peter Attia.
Oh, Peter Attia. Okay, Outlive. Yep. Okay.
And it's one of the greatest books ever. So he was a formidable attorney, doctor, surgeon, and Hopkins, and he gave all that up to really research what makes us, live long life and what drives our health and wellness into especially when you get older.
Yeah.
And, so he's great. And because of that book, I went and did a series of tests that your doctors normally don't do, and I figured out there were a lot of things that were not right at the time. So we've been trying to focus on fixing all these things.
That's great. Well, we'll put a link to the show notes to that book for anyone who wants to check that out. That's awesome. So if you had to do it all over again, and you can take this from your career perspective or from the selling of the company, the decisions you made, if you had to do it all over again, knowing what you know now, what would you do differently?
What I would do differently would be number one thing is which I've taught to the three guys, and they are following it to a T, and I'm very proud of them, is not to grow too fast. Don't get too ambitious or greedy. I hate to say it, but I got greedy. I went
Yes.
from 30 million to 100 million overnight. That meant that I had about over $200 million of contracts and expanded throughout California. We had work from Redding all the way to San Diego and from Lake Tahoe all the way to Bay Area. And with 17 projects in 2011, it was a crazy time. And I ended up hiring folks that we knew and some that we didn't really know. And that's where I would suggest that home grow the folks that you trust. And if you're going to expand, make sure those folks are involved. For example, expand fast enough to be able to place one of your trustworthy operations folks, which is where the wheels typically fall off, because you can centralize your operations, right? I mean, you can operate your accounting and your administration right out of Sacramento and open up 3 or 4 offices throughout California and be completely in control. But when it comes down to the field operations, you've got to have good employees and then even better managers of those employees. And in order to do that, you've got to trust your managers and you've got to train and grow your employees internally before you go and grow them at the rate that we did.
So you were telling me that it sounded like the whole process for you was a 5-year one in terms of the internal sale. What do you think is the optimal window based on your experience now for that kind of a sale that you guys went through?
Optimal would be 7 to 10 years. I would say 3 years of 3 to even 4 years of planning prior to looking at options and figuring out its internal sale. Who are the folks that are internally you want to leave the company to, and then getting the right team of professionals to help you with the process. Getting the right CPA and attorneys. Those two are very key in putting your contracts together and your financial plans together. Finding the right team. And then once you figure out all of that, then getting to a contract. It took us about 6, 7 months, maybe 8 months to put the contract together. I would take about a year. It was a little bit rushed. Again, it all turned out good. It turned out fine. Great, actually. But then in the process of execution, you got to give yourself more time. More time means in terms of earnings. More time means less taxes. So instead of a 3-4 year payout plan, which was my plan, turn it into a 6 to 7 year payout plan, for example. So you earn less per year, you pay less taxes per year, and it's a slower process. For me, that wasn't the ticket. I just wanted out as quickly as possible, and the timing worked out just perfect because now I can focus on the second chapter of my life after retirement. And I'm not done with business. I'm looking at opportunities in other areas, development, that sort of thing. And I can spend a lot of time with my family. So for me, it was priorities were different, but I would again, suggest 8 to 10 years prior to date that you want to retire, start the process.
Yep. One last question I have is kind of a detailed question, but I think it's an important one. You present the idea of owning the business to, your internal folks. What was it like for them when they realized that if they're going to be owners, then they're going to be personally liable for the construction projects that are being built? What was that like for them? Did they get that, or was it just all enthusiasm and it kind of took time? Can you describe that?
Yeah, I think at first was more of a shock. I don't know. They had to get used to the idea, and it really took a couple of years for it to start sinking in. So at the beginning, they were obviously very enthusiastic about the entire process and what was happening to them. But as they went through, it wasn't really real till they started earning some percentages of ownership, and they were given more autonomy by me to do things, and I started backing myself out on purpose.
Yep.
I know that at time it was very frustrating for them because I would not participate in a lot of the plans because I didn't want to go and open up new doors and then tell the new client, hey, I'm your new client, I'm the CEO, by the way, I'm leaving, goodbye. And so it was very frustrating for them to go through that. I don't know about very frustrating, but it was frustrating for them to see and go through that. And so again, by second, third year, they started seriously stepping into what they were supposed to do. And they got it. And they did a great job of, implementing everything that we needed on the estimating, pre-construction, operations, and accounting side of things.
That's interesting because that's another question I'll ask you about then. How did you manage client relationships and expectations? Because if you have all these clients who buy from Tony and now they're buying from Chris and the other gentleman, how did you manage that?
We had a number of clients with ongoing projects. So I met with them and basically explained the process. And I also mentioned to them that even after the sale, I was remaining on the board of directors, which is true. And I did. So I gave them comfort level, and I made sure that they understood that the plan was going to be solid. And the folks that were part of the plan were people that had been with the company and they knew already who they were. So we weren't introducing new people to them. The existing clients that we had done previous work with, honestly, I just left them alone. And they heard through the process. And I didn't want to start a can of worms with too many people. I didn't want to go out there and, beat the drum too much. There's some negativity associated with you leaving.
Yes, of
you're
course.
the face of the company, and you want to be careful with that balance of letting people know. So you got to let the right people know, so to speak.
Yep. Excellent. When is your book coming out, Tony?
Planning for June, July.
Excellent. Wonderful. Well, we'll look for that. And once it comes out, I'm going to check it out. It would be great to have you back on the show to discuss that in a little more detail, because I think those insights will be tremendously helpful to the audience.
That sounds great. I enjoyed this. Thank you, Eric.
Appreciate your time, Tony. Thanks for coming on with us again. Hope you enjoy my conversation with Tony today. I did very much. And I want you to go to the show notes and check out my first interview with Tony. And that was recorded way back in the day in 2020, but it was a great interview. And so go check that out. The links are in the show notes, and it's all about how he refused to quit, fought through hard times, and triumphed over failure in business. Thank you for listening to the show today. Feel free to share this podcast with other people that you think would benefit from listening, and I'll catch you on the next episode. Thank you for listening to this episode of Construction Genius. Hope you found that 1% of inspiration to help you in the next few days. If you like the show, please give us a 5-star review on iTunes, share it with other construction leaders who you think would benefit, and always remember that the show is brought to you by Kick-Ass Meetings. I've been working with construction leaders since 2004, teaching them how to run extremely effective problem-solving meetings that gets their people collaborating, taps into their creativity. And to get yourself a free copy of the Kick-Ass Meeting Report, go to www.ericanderton.com/kickassmeetings. Grab yourself that free report, read it, use it in your business. You'll find it extremely useful. And thanks again for listening.